I raised my daughter by myself after her mother left us. But now, 7 years later, I'm not invited to her wedding because she wants her stepdad, who she says is better, to walk her down the aisle. So, I decided to give a special gift I had planned for her to my niece instead, and now my daughter is acting upset. Hi everyone, my name is James Daniels, I'm 57 years old, and I'm struggling with my relationship with my daughter, Rosie, who's 23. 7 years ago, when Rosie was 16, my wife Linda, who's 55 now, left us without a word. Linda and I met in college when I was 22 and she was 20. It was a typical love story. We met at a party, hit it off instantly, and she had this amazing laugh that made everyone around her happy. We dated for 3 years, and I proposed to her on a snowy night in the park. She said yes with tears of joy. We were really happy and got married in a small ceremony with close family and friends. Linda looked beautiful in her white dress, and I felt like the luckiest man in the world. The first few years were great. Like any couple, we had our ups and downs, but we managed. We even bought a little house in a quiet neighborhood and made it our cozy home. Then, Rosie was born, and everything changed for the better. She was the most beautiful baby with her mother's eyes and my smile. Being a father was the best thing that ever happened to me. I remember holding Rosie late at night, dreaming about our future together. At first, Linda was a wonderful mother. She adored Rosie and seemed happy. But over time, things changed. Linda became distant. She wasn't the cheerful woman I married. She seemed unhappy, but when I tried to talk to her, she'd either brush me off or get defensive. I didn't know what was wrong because she wouldn't tell me. We started arguing more often. I'd come home from work, and she'd be in a bad mood, snapping at me for no reason. I tried to be understanding and supportive, but nothing I did seemed to help. I remember about a year before she left, Linda told me she needed space. She said she felt trapped and needed time to figure things out. I was heartbroken but agreed to give her the space she asked for. Linda moved into the guest room, and our communication got worse. It felt like we were strangers living in the same house. Even with the tension, I tried to keep things normal for Rosie. She was a teenager facing her challenges, and I didn't want her to see our marriage falling apart. Linda still cared about Rosie, but it was clear she was dealing with her problems. I thought she might be going through a midlife crisis, but I never thought she would leave us. One day, I came home and found a note from Linda on the kitchen table. She wrote that she needed to leave to find herself. She didn't give any details or say where she was going. She just said she couldn't stay and hoped I'd understand. I was shocked. I couldn't believe she would just walk out on us like that. It felt like my world was falling apart. Rosie was heartbroken. She kept asking why her mom left, and I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something like that to a teenager? I told her that her mom loved her but needed to sort out some things in her life. It was a difficult time for both of us. Rosie and I became closer as we tried to figure out how to live without Linda. Later, I found out that Linda had left me for another man. A few months later, she sent me divorce papers. I signed them just to get it over with. Not long after, she married a man named David, who was 59. As a man, my self-esteem hit rock bottom. It was clear that Linda left me because David had more money. But eventually, I got over it. Learning she left me for someone else felt like a stab in the heart. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at those divorce papers, trying to understand everything. I couldn't believe she had moved on so quickly, especially with someone much better off financially. It made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I couldn't give her what she needed. David was a successful businessman. I saw pictures of him online, and he seemed to have it all: fancy cars, a big house, the whole package. I couldn't compete with that. I had a regular job, just enough to pay the bills and take care of Rosie. Linda always seemed supportive of my work, or so I thought. I never imagined she wanted more or felt like she was missing out on a luxurious life. When she married David, I was devastated. I felt like I was being replaced, not just as a husband, but as a father too. David was the kind of guy who could give her everything she ever wanted, and that hurt. I spent a lot of time questioning myself, wondering what I did wrong. It was a dark time, and I often felt like I was drowning in my sadness. For a while, I just went through the motions, taking care of Rosie, going to work, trying to keep things together, but inside, I was a mess. Rosie noticed, of course. She tried to be strong, but I knew she was hurting too. She missed her mom, and it was hard for her to understand why Linda left us for someone else. Eventually, I realized I had to get myself together for Rosie's sake, if not for my own. I realized I couldn't keep living in the past and letting it control my life. Over the years, Rosie got used to life without her mom. She stopped asking questions and just accepted that Linda wasn't around. She focused on her college and friends, which helped her cope. But one day, out of the blue, Linda reached out to her. I remember when Rosie told me her mom had called. She was excited but also nervous, unsure of what to expect, and so was I. They started talking on the phone, and soon after, they met for coffee. Rosie didn't share much about their conversation. She seemed happy but cautious, not wanting to get hurt again. I tried to be supportive, telling her it was good to have her mom back in her life, but deep down, I was scared. I didn't want Rosie to get her hopes up only to be let down if Linda left again. Over time, their relationship grew. They would meet occasionally, and Rosie began talking about her mom more often. She told me about their chats and what they did together. It seemed like they were getting along, and that made me happy. Rosie deserved to have her mom in her life, and I hoped Linda would stick around this time. Things took a turn a few months ago when Rosie told me she was getting married. She was so excited, and seeing her so happy made me glad. She mentioned that she would invite Linda and David. Although I wasn't thrilled about seeing them, I was genuinely pleased for Rosie. It was her big day, and I wanted it to be perfect for her. Rosie started planning the wedding with so much joy. She talked about the dress, the flowers, and the venue. I was excited to see my little girl get married and begin a new chapter in her life. We had a few planning sessions where she shared her ideas, and I offered my help in any way I could. I thought everything was going smoothly and that I would be part of this special occasion. However, about 2 weeks ago, Rosie came to my house looking serious. I could tell she was nervous. I thought she was going to ask for advice or talk about the wedding plans, but what she said was unexpected. She told me that Linda and David were willing to pay for the entire wedding, but there was a condition: they would pay for everything as long as I didn't come to the wedding. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say at first. I just sat there, trying to process what I had just heard. I told her this was ridiculous and reminded her that I was her father. I couldn't understand why she would agree to such a thing. I asked her who would walk her down the aisle if I wasn't there, and she said David had agreed to do it. Hearing that felt like a punch to the gut. I was hurt and confused. I could see in her eyes that she had already made up her mind, and that broke my heart even more. I asked her how she could do this to me after everything we had been through together. How could she cut me out of such an important moment in her life? She seemed almost annoyed by my question, like she didn't understand why I was so upset. She said that David was better because he could afford to pay for the wedding. It felt like she didn't care about my feelings. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe that my daughter, whom I had raised and loved, could be so cruel. It felt like all those years of being there for her meant nothing. I told her that if this was what she wanted, then I would be okay with it. But I wasn't okay at all. Inside, I was shattered. It felt even worse than when Linda left me. At least then, I had Rosie to hold on to. Now it felt like I had lost her too. I wasn't poor by any means. I had a good job and a comfortable life, and I always provided for Rosie. But I definitely couldn't give her the kind of extravagant wedding that Linda and David could. They had money and connections that I just didn't have. Still, I had one thing I had been saving to give Rosie as a wedding gift, something that meant a lot to me. My parents left me a property in a very nice neighborhood. It was a beautiful house, much nicer than the one I lived in. I had always thought of it as Rosie's inheritance and planned to give it to her on her wedding day as a surprise. I thought it would be a perfect start for her new life. It was my way of showing her how much I loved her and wanted to support her future. But since I wasn't invited to the wedding, I started to question if there was any point in giving her this gift. Why would I give her something so valuable if she didn't even want me at her wedding? It hurt to think that she might not care about my gift, just like she didn't seem to care about my feelings when she chose David over me. I have a niece, Lily, whom I love dearly. She's always been there for me, and we have a great relationship. She's studying hard, working part-time, and dreaming of her future. She's kind and thoughtful and has always made an effort to keep in touch, even when things got tough in the family. I started to think about giving the house to her instead. Lily's family wasn't well off, and she had struggled a lot. I realized that giving Lily the house could change her life. She could live there, sell it, use the money to fund her education, or even start a business. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Lily was someone who loved and appreciated me and could truly benefit from this gift. So, I decided to give the house to her. It wasn't an easy choice because, deep down, I still wanted to give it to Rosie, but it felt like the right thing to do. I didn't want to give something so precious to someone who didn't value me or my presence in her life. When I told Lily about the house, her eyes lit up with joy. She couldn't believe it and hugged me, thanking me over and over again. It felt good to see her so happy and to know that I was making a real difference in her life. It was a moment of joy during a difficult time for me. However, when Rosie heard about this, she wasn't happy. She called me, probably to try to talk me out of giving the house to Lily. I saw her name pop up on my phone, and my heart sank a little, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready for another confrontation or more hurtful words. The next day, she came to my house. I could see her through the window, standing on the porch with a look of determination mixed with frustration. I knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant visit, but I opened the door anyway. She came in, looking around like she was seeing the place for the first time in a long while. It felt tense, and I could tell she was gearing up to say something big. Rosie sat down on the couch and started talking. She said she heard about the house and how I was planning to give it to Lily. Her voice was calm at first, but there was a hint of something more beneath the surface. She said she was surprised and thought the house was meant for her. It felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me, to make me feel bad for giving something valuable to someone else. Rosie started to cry, or at least it seemed like crying at first. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked at me with a sad, almost pitiful expression. She said she couldn't believe I would do something like this to her and that after everything, she deserved the house. She talked about how much it would mean to her and how it would be a way to start her new life with her husband. It felt like she was trying to manipulate me, using those tears to get what she wanted. But the more she talked, the more it felt off. Her tears seemed forced, like she was putting on a show. She kept looking at me, waiting for a reaction, expecting me to crumble and give in to her demands. She said things like, "Dad, how could you choose Lily over your daughter? And, don't you love me?" It was painful to hear, but I could see through it. It was clear she was trying to use my emotions against me. Rosie talked about the wedding, how beautiful it was going to be, and how much it would mean to have a house like that to start her new life. She said David and Linda were only trying to help her have the best start possible and that I was being selfish by not supporting her dreams. She made it sound like I was the bad guy, like I was the one causing all the problems. It was hard to listen to because, deep down, I just wanted to make her happy. She kept crying and saying she couldn't understand why I would do this to her. She tried to make me feel guilty for not being at her wedding and for not being the one to walk her down the aisle. She said she missed me and wanted things to be like they used to be, but it didn't feel genuine. It felt like she was saying whatever she thought would make me change my mind about the house. She even said that I could come to the wedding if I wanted. It felt like a last-ditch effort to win me over, framed as if she was doing me a favor by letting me attend. But I told her that I didn't want to do this anymore. I was done being manipulated and treated like an option instead of a priority. It wasn't just about the wedding or the house, it was about how I had been pushed aside and how my feelings had been disregarded. However, some of my relatives are now telling me that I took things too far. What do you guys think? Update 1. Hello everyone, thank you for your kind words. Your support means a lot to me. I do have some updates, and things have taken quite an unexpected turn. After my last post, Rosie kept calling and texting me, trying to reach out. She left voicemails too, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready to talk to her, especially after everything that had happened. I needed time to heal and to figure out my feelings. I thought that maybe with time we could have a real conversation, but I didn't want to rush into it. However, things have changed drastically since then. Rosie is not getting married anymore. As it turns out, she cheated on her fiancé, and he left her. I was shocked when I found out. I never expected something like this to happen. Her fiancé caught her in the act. He came home earlier than expected one day and found Rosie with another man in their apartment. I can't even imagine how devastating that must have been for him. He confronted them right then and there. The details are messy, but from what I gathered, he walked into the living room and saw them together on the couch in a very compromising position. It must have been a nightmare for him. I heard that he was so furious and heartbroken that he didn't even give them a chance to explain. He immediately kicked her out, telling her to take her things and never come back. I found out about this through a mutual friend who still keeps in touch with Rosie's circle. One evening, Rosie called and told me everything. She thought I should know, given all that had happened with the wedding and the house. I was stunned. I didn't know what to think or feel. On one hand, I felt bad for Rosie because I knew this must be incredibly painful for her. On the other hand, I was angry and disappointed. She had made poor choices and hurt so many people, including herself. Hearing her story brought up a lot of mixed emotions. I felt deep sadness because, despite everything, Rosie is still my daughter, and I don't want to see her hurt. But it also made me wonder how things might have been different if she had made better choices and treated people with more respect. I sent her a message, expressing my sorrow for what she was going through and hoping she was okay. I didn't mention the house or the wedding, just focused on letting her know I cared about her well-being. It was tough to send that message, bringing up unresolved feelings, but it felt like the right thing to do. Since then, Rosie has been living with Linda and David. It must have been hard for them too, especially financially, with most of the wedding arrangements already in place. Part of me feels Rosie got what she deserved. Cheating on her fiancé was a betrayal of trust, and now she's facing the consequences. It's a tough lesson, but sometimes we have to face the fallout of our actions to grow and change. Update 2. Hey everyone, it's been a while, but there have been some major developments in my life recently. I wanted to share what's been going on. About a month ago, Rosie and Linda had a huge fight. According to Rosie, it was about a lot of things that had been building up between them. Linda was upset about how Rosie had treated her fiancé and how it reflected on their family. She felt embarrassed and disappointed in Rosie's choices, and it all came to a head in a heated argument. Rosie called me in tears, asking if she could stay with me for a while. She said things had gotten really bad between her and Linda, and she needed a place to stay until they could sort things out. Part of me wanted to help her. She sounded so desperate and lost, and it hurt to hear her like that. But I knew I couldn't just welcome her back into my life after everything that had happened. The pain and betrayal were still fresh, and I needed time to heal. I told Rosie that I couldn't let her stay with me. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but I knew it was the right decision for my well-being. Rosie was upset and pleaded with me to reconsider. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go and needed my help. It tore me apart to hear her so desperate, but I had to stay strong. I explained that while I cared about her and wanted the best for her, I couldn't be the one to support her right now. I needed to focus on my healing and move forward with my life. After that conversation, I felt a mix of emotions: guilt for not helping Rosie when she needed it most, worry about her safety and well-being, and relief for standing my ground and prioritizing my own needs. Since then, Rosie has been staying with a friend. She's been reaching out to other family members and friends, trying to find a more permanent place to stay. It's a tough situation for everyone involved, and I hope she finds the support and stability she needs. As for me, I'm focusing on self-care and rebuilding my life. I'm spending time with friends, pursuing hobbies that bring me joy, and reflecting on what I want for my future. It's a process, and there are good days and bad days, but I'm taking it one step at a time. I know some people might think I was too harsh in not letting Rosie stay with me. They might say that families should always support each other, especially in times of need. And while I understand that perspective, I also know that sometimes tough love is necessary. I needed to set boundaries for my emotional well-being, and that meant saying no to Rosie's request. Update 3. Hey everyone, it hasn't been long since my last update, but there's been a new development. A few days ago, Rosie tried to get into my house. It was a shock because she still had the spare key I had given her before everything fell apart between us. When I arrived home from work, I walked into the living room, and there she was, sitting on the couch. I was taken aback and didn't know what to say at first. I asked her what she was doing there, but she seemed determined not to leave. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go and needed a safe place to stay. It was clear she was in a tough spot, but I wasn't prepared for her to show up like this. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm, but I also knew I had to set boundaries. I told her firmly that she wasn't invited into my house and needed to leave. I reminded her that I had already said no to her staying with me before, and that hadn't changed. Rosie started to argue, saying she had nowhere else to go and needed my help. She pleaded with me to let her stay just for a little while until she figured things out. It was hard to see her so desperate and vulnerable, but I knew I couldn't let her manipulate me into letting her stay. As the conversation went on, she became more insistent and emotional. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. It was painful to hear, but I had to stay strong. I told her that if she didn't leave voluntarily, I would have to call the police. After realizing I was serious, Rosie gathered her things and left. I could see the disappointment and hurt in her eyes as she packed up. It was a tough moment for both of us, but I knew I had to stick to my decision. About a minute after Rosie left, I heard the doorbell ring again. I was hesitant to answer, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw it was Rosie. She asked if she could at least come in to get some things from her room. I didn't want to drag out the situation, so I agreed, though reluctantly. I waited downstairs while she went up to her room. It felt surreal knowing she was in my house, even if just for a few minutes. Part of me wanted to talk to her, to understand what was going through her mind, but I knew it wasn't the right time. About 5 minutes later, Rosie came back down with a small bag of her belongings and left quietly. I know some people might think I should have let Rosie stay or that I was too harsh in how I handled the situation. It's a difficult thing to navigate, especially when it involves family and emotions are running high. But I also know that I have to prioritize my mental health and healing. Update 4. Hey everyone, I appreciate all the support and understanding you've shown me throughout this journey. I wanted to give you all a final update on where things stand now. Recently, some of my relatives came across this Reddit thread and showed it to Rosie. She was upset that I had shared our family issues with strangers on the internet. She confronted me about it, expressing her anger and disappointment. She felt like I had betrayed her trust by airing our private matters in a public forum. I tried to explain to Rosie that I shared my story as a way to process my emotions and seek support from others who might have gone through similar experiences. I told her that I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for sharing my feelings and perspective. On a positive note, I have some good news about Rosie. She has managed to find a small studio apartment about 25 minutes away from my house. It's not far, but it's a step towards independence and stability for her. I'm glad she's taking this step and finding a place of her own where she can start to rebuild her life. In another bit of good news, I recently took my niece, Lily, to my parents' house to show her the new place. She was thrilled and excited about it, which made me happy. Lily is currently in college, and I promised her that if she finds a job nearby after graduation, she can move into the house right away. I haven't officially transferred the house to Lily yet because there are some logistics to figure out. I want to make sure everything is set up properly so she won't have to worry about taxes or any other legalities associated with the property. It's important to me that she starts her new chapter in the house without any unnecessary stress. Finally, I want to express my gratitude to every one of you who has supported me through this challenging time. Your words of encouragement, advice, and understanding have meant the world to me. It's been comforting to know that I'm not alone in navigating these difficult emotions and decisions.